Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Baseball Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We'll be covering 4 topics, and those topics are, first we're going to be talking about the worst contracts in baseball, how they've affected their teams, and just how bad they really are. Next, we'll be talking about impact prospects for each team, the AL and the NL, prospects that can come up this year, really make an impact to the team, and really make a difference in where they might be. And finally, we'll end with some just general news around the league and what's going on with that. But before we do that, I would like to ask you to please like and follow the show. Also, we got a number of questions from viewers that come in during the show. So to ensure that your question does get read on air, I do ask that you please use the tips and donation link that you see on the screen, streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network /tip. It really does help the show, and it really does mean a lot. So thank you so much for that. All right, so we're going to get into our first segment here, and I talked about it before. It is the worst contracts in baseball, and just generally about that and what they are and how they affected their teams, and yeah. So if you are into baseball news and you've seen baseball news over the past day or so, you probably know why I'm talking about this. And you would be correct. The reason I'm talking about this is because of Anthony Rendon. If you didn't see, Anthony Rendon made a lot of comments to the media about baseball, about himself, about how committed he is, and just his contract. So it kind of got people talking, okay, where does Rendon rank in the worst contracts, not only of all time at this point? I think that's a very fair question to ask, but also just in baseball right now. So it got me thinking, and I had this as a segment, so we're going to talk about it. So, the first one we're going to talk about is the man I just mentioned, Anthony Rendon. So, Rendon obviously signed a huge contract with the Angels a few off seasons ago. Signed for 7 years, $245 million. Huge contract. At the time, he was supposed to be seen as the third part of the big three with Ohtani and Trout. Would add a lot more protection to that lineup for them. Would just help them a lot more with depth in that lineup, because as much as people might have seen the Angels and said, okay, this is a team that just needs pitching help. Everything else is good. I mean, their lineup is great. They have Ohtani and Trout, right? It kind of wasn't the case. Their lineup wasn't bad because they did have Ohtani and Trout, but they also did need more players. They needed more protection for both those two. It was kind of those two, maybe one or two other okay guys, and that was it. So adding Rendon, they thought they could get another superstar bat in the lineup. Having a 2-3-4, that's pretty impossible to pitch to, and that was kind of the plan. And to put it lightly, it has not worked out very well. So he hasn't played in 60 games ever with his time in the Angels, all 4 years. He's had a 758 OPS, a 109 OPS plus, and those aren't that awful of numbers. I want to mention 109 OPS plus, that's above average. It's 100 is average, so 109. It's not that much above average, but it is still above average. So you're getting a fine hitter. But at the same time, you're paying $245 over 7 for an okay hitter. That's just doesn't seem like a great business model, and it doesn't seem like a good contract whatsoever. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. So I would definitely say he has not worked out with the Angels, and his contract has become a pretty big flop with them, just kind of adding into this skew of just bad personnel decisions the Angels have made over the past few years. You can add it in with the Pujols contract as well. So, yeah, it's not turned out very well. And not only that, it would have been something else. We maybe would have looked at this Rendon contract different if we just said, okay, you know what? He's been fine when he's been out there. He's battled some injuries. Last year had a freak injury, hitting a ball off his toe. So maybe it's not his fault. He's trying to fight to get back. It's not really the Angels' fault, not his fault, just these things happen. But he's had a lot of off-the-field stuff as well. You look at just yesterday when he said baseball isn't his first priority, and if he doesn't like what he's doing, he'll just leave, and he doesn't really care about baseball. He basically said it in a nice way. Now, I want to be clear in my way of saying that there's no problem with not having necessarily a big passion for the game of baseball, or having it as your life. A lot of players have it as their life. A lot of players only want to play baseball, and a lot of players don't. That's perfectly fine. Tim Anderson is a player I can think of. Anderson has stated multiple times that he doesn't watch baseball. He doesn't really care about baseball. I mean, he cares because it's his job, but he's not something he would choose to watch or something he did watch. He's only doing it because he's really good at it. And props to him. That's fine. I don't see any problem with that. And Tim Anderson works, he works very hard. He is a very good player. He's shown commitment to the game of baseball. He's shown that even though it's not his passion, he still takes it, he still realizes how big of a responsibility it is when you play in the MLB and how many people count on you. And, playing well. As we saw last year, he got into a fight in the clubhouse with a teammate because they weren't hustling enough. So it's different when it's that, when it's not necessarily your passion or your life, but you still want to try. Rendon, I don't think is trying. We saw that yesterday. He kind of said it himself, how it's just his job and other things come before it, which again is fine. It's just when you're not making a conceited effort to come back and play the game to your highest level when you have this much of a contract, it's not a good look for not only you or the organization that gave you this much money. So this contract has turned out to just be a complete disaster for the Angels, not just on the field, but off the field, of course, as well. As I'm saying, it's turning into a PR disaster with just him collecting paychecks, not really caring. So it's just not been good at all. It's not been a good stay in Anaheim for Rendon, and I'm sure the Angels would agree as well. So I would say this is definitely up there as one of the worst contracts in baseball, maybe the worst. You could decide that for yourself, but as we go down the list of players I have here for this, maybe you'll change your mind, or maybe you'll say, okay, Rendon is the worst contract in baseball. Next, Giancarlo Stanton. We all knew Stanton was going to be on this list. He had to be. So I'm not going to mention the first contract he signed because he signed that with a different team, and the Yankees traded for it, of course. But currently remaining, he has 4 years, $118 million left for the Yankees and his contract. Since being traded to New York, he's only played in one full season of games, 158, and after that, it's just not been a lot. He's had 813 OPS with them, 121 OPS plus. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, those are pretty good numbers. Anyone would kill for a 121 OPS plus, 813. That's great. I don't see a problem with that. He's playing really well. The problem is when you look deeper and you realize what he's getting paid for. Giancarlo Stanton is a full-time DH. He rarely ever, if ever, plays the field. And when he does play the field, it's not to a high degree. So you're paying Stanton to simply hit the baseball, be a superstar DH. And you're paying him a lot of money for it, as we stated. And so the contract you're paying him, is that really worth it to just get a full-time hitter who has a 121 OPS plus? Now, again, not a bad number, but you look at how much they're paying him. You look at what he does for the team, which is not much because he's supposed to just be hitting, and he's hurt a lot of the time. So it's kind of like, okay, what are we really paying for at that point? So it's kind of just not turned out to be a very good investment for the Yankees when they traded for him. Obviously, you can make the argument, okay, it's fine because of the Yankees. They have a lot of money. They didn't give up anything for him. They gave up Starlin Castro and some random prospects, which is fine. We're getting him for nothing. And again, we're the Yankees. We can spend money. And that would be a fine argument. It's just, you've seen what the Yankees have done the past few years. You've seen what free agents they haven't signed. And because of Stanton, it's because of that, really. I'm going to go to the most prevalent one, and a lot of people have talked about it over the past few years for good reason. Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper wanted to play for the Yankees. He grew up a diehard Yankees fan. He wanted to play for the Yankees. He wanted to play for the Pinstripes. He wanted to play on baseball's biggest stage. He voiced that many times. As a kid, even when he was Boy Wonder, who was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 16, he said he wanted to play for the Yankees, win a World Series. Those were his only goals. And he even said he would be willing to play first base for the Yankees. At this point in his career, obviously he's a full-time first baseman now. He was a full-time right fielder. Telling them, I would play first base for you, that's how much he wants to play for them. That's just like, okay, you're the Yankees, he's a star, he wants to play for you, let's wrap this up. But instead, they had the Stanton contract. And it kind of seemed like, as you were getting progressed in the offseason, when you realized the Yankees weren't a good fit for him, it was because of the Stanton contract. It was one or the other, and they chose Stanton. So you didn't have, let's say the Yankees don't trade for Stanton. They have Bryce Harper right now. I would be very surprised if they didn't. I would assume he would have probably taken less money to go to the Yankees. You have Judge, you have Harper, You have all these young players on your team now. You have Cole, assuming you still sign Cole. So your outlook as a team could be drastically different if you had Harper. Again, Stanton's not a bad player, but he's hurt too much. He doesn't perform for what he does, which is only hits. And you look at the contract that he has. You look at how he's kind of, handicapped them a little bit in the free agent market over the past few years, getting stars like Bryce Harper, like Manny Machado, who I haven't even mentioned, who wanted to play for the Yankees as well. They had a clear spot opening at third base. It's kind of become one of the worst contracts in baseball pretty easily. So I would definitely mention Stanton up here. I think it's one of the worst contracts in baseball. I think it's pretty clear and that anyone can see that. So not been a great tenure in the Bronx for Stanton. Sorry about that. Drink some water. Next, we have Chris Bryant. Now, Chris Bryant, we all knew was going to be on this list. Same thing as Stanton. Not much of a surprise here. The moment Chris Bryant signed with the Rockies on a huge contract, 7 over 182, we all kind of, as baseball fans, thought, okay, this isn't going to end well. And when you look at it, it didn't end well, and it's not going well. Since joining the Rockies, he has negative .6 WAR, negative, 93 OPS plus, and he's played in 42 games and 80 games in his career with the Rockies. Those are disgustingly horrible numbers. I mean, those are just awful. For a guy who's getting the contract he is, a guy who's a former MVP, that's insane. Now, I always thought this was going to be bad, this contract. I didn't think it was going to age well. I think we saw that over the past few years with the unwillingness of teams like the Cubs and the Giants to re-sign him. But, man, it has turned out to be just an absolute disaster. You could argue this is the worst contract in baseball, and I would probably agree with you. And you look at it just not on paper as well. Look at the other circumstances that are surrounding it. You traded Nolan Arenado, and then you signed Chris Bryant, who, yes, he's not playing third base for you, but you're still giving a big contract to a guy who was a third baseman when you signed him. Obviously, he plays left field now. But you could have had Arenado. You traded for him for nothing, and you gave away money to trade him. And then you signed Chris Bryant to this awful contract, which has turned out to just be so disgustingly bad. It's just incredible. So it's just not been good. Colorado. This contract I thought was going to be horrible when they signed it. It has turned out to be horrible, and it just shows the Rockies' incompetence as a franchise. I don't know what their plan is. We're going to talk about them a little later, but yeah, this has not turned out well, and it's probably the worst contract in baseball right now. Not good for Rockies fans, the ones that still exist out there, still haven't given up on their team. Finally, we're going to end off with El Mago himself, Chris Bryant's former teammate, Javi Baez. Same thing with his Cubs teammate, Chris Bryant. We all kind of knew this contract would be bad when he first signed. He had a great second half with the Mets before signing with the Tigers. I'll give him that. He kind of made him differentiated himself from the past. He stopped swinging at pitches out of 5 feet out of the strike zone. He walked more. Maybe the Tigers saw something in that. We're like, okay, you know what? He can keep this going. He can, maybe turn that over. We'll get a guy with a maybe, 115, 120 OPS plus, WRC plus, plays great defense. But instead, he's had a 62 OPS plus over his 2 years with the Tigers. 62. I don't think people are going to understand how horrible that is. A 62 OPS plus. That's just insane. That's so bad. It's so bad. So, and it's not only that, it's also you had such a generational shortstop class that you could have signed someone in if you're the Tigers. You could have signed Carlos Correa, who had a connection with your former manager, A.J. Hinch. Both were in Houston. You could have signed Trevor Story, who maybe hasn't turned out the greatest, but is still better than Baez, and maybe would have turned out in a better place than Boston. We don't know. So just looking at all the circumstances that surround this contract, it has just turned out to be horrible. So bad, and I think I kind of expected it to turn out to be this bad as well. So it's not very surprising, but man, it has turned out to be bad, and it's kind of put a damper on a young Tigers team because they have a really good future, but I don't know if they're going to be able to spend money on a big free agent in the next coming years because they have this guy in their payroll for 4 more years. So it's kind of put a damper on that a little bit, but Tigers still going to have a good future. So Tigers still have a good future. Baez or not, hey, he still plays good defense, I guess. That's something. Maybe he'll pick the hitting back up for a year or two. I doubt it, but crazier things have happened in baseball, so we can definitely see. So just to recap here a little bit, talked about Anthony Rendon, his contract, and how horrible it's become, and the off-the-field antics as well. Stanton, how bad his has been, and how it's prevented them from getting other free agents. Chris Bryant, man, negative .6 WAR is just insane. And Javi Baez, 62 OPS plus after a 6-year, $140 million contract. Really bad contracts. So that was our first segment. We're going to be taking a break, and then we'll go to our next segment. But first, we're going to be talking about our next segment, impact prospects for the American League. These are prospects I think can come up, make a big impact for these teams, kind of change the way the season's going to progress for them. And, yeah, just kind of all that. We'll talk about it next. We're going to take a break, but we'll be back after that. So, thanks.